Are you the parent of children under the age of 6 and interested in pursuing a Charlotte Mason education and want to know what you should be doing during this time with your children? Then this video is for you. The early years are qualified as those preschool, kindergarten years before formal education should begin, which shouldn't happen before the age of 6. And for Charlotte Mason, these early years are formative years and a beautiful time to focus on nourishing our children's minds through good, true, and noble ideas without succumbing to the school or the societal pressures of formal lessons. Now, that's not to say that you should deny your child a formal lesson should they have an interest for them, or that you should redirect your child who's trying to learn to write or read. You should actually follow your child's rhythm, but you shouldn't be pushing those formal lessons on your children because there are so many more useful things that your child should be doing at this age. Sometimes it may feel like we are spending those early years preparing our children for school when we're actually doing so much more than that. And it's work that's not just going to prepare your children for school, but that's going to prepare them for life, and that's going to build upon their persona. In one of the Parents Reviews volumes, which was a home training and culture magazine for parents and teachers of Charlotte Mason schools, she says the following: "If a child chooses to read and write before he is 6, let him, but do not make him. And when he does begin, there's no occasion to hurry. Let him have a couple of years for the task." What this means is that so much of the learning that our children do, such as counting, learning to categorize, learning colors, learning the alphabet, can be done through play rather than through a sit down and hammer it in method. Reading home education provides so much insight and so much inspiration, but I admit it's a pretty overwhelming read. I mean, it's in Victorian English, and you really have to take your time going through it. So to simplify things for you, I've taken out 3 of the most prominent ideas which I believe will serve parents of preschool-aged children well in their education as well as in their life. So here are 3 priorities that you should consider when pursuing a Charlotte Mason home education for your children and for your family. Number 1, nourishing your children daily with loving, right, and noble ideas. Number 2, focusing on instilling good habits in our children. And number 3, focusing on the outdoors and about learning about the natural world. Parents and Children volume of home education, Charlotte Mason gives us the education formula, which is summed up as following: education is a life, that life is sustained on ideas, ideas are of spiritual origin, and God has made us so. Charlotte Mason encourages us parents to be inspirers for our children. It's no light role to sow ideas in our children's minds. On page 34 of her second volume, which is Parents and Children, she describes ideas as following: we say of an idea that it strikes us, impresses us, seizes us, takes possession of us, and rules us. And then she continues on to say, in the end, we shall find that only those ideas which have fed his life are taken into the being of the child. All the rest is thrown away, or worse, is like sawdust in the system, an impediment and an injury to the vital processes. So it may be so that feeding good ideas to our children is the most important thing in home education. This is where all growth begins, and through entertaining those ideas, they learn to notice and make sense of thoughts and then develop free thinking abilities. Being born persons as opposed to being a blank slate, our children's souls feed off those good ideas. And that's how the birth of new ideas happens and takes place, and how we as parents nurture our children to be creative and to think outside the box. This is where I highly recommend the habit of morning time with your preschool and kindergarten age children, and start out with a morning basket. So a morning basket is a beautiful tool to help you nourish your children with those good, beautiful, and true ideas. Charlotte Mason called on us to give our children a feast of ideas, and that's precisely what it accomplishes. Taking the time to immerse my children in beautiful ideas in the form of poetry, art, music, literature, it's an anchor to our days. Our morning basket contains a lot of evergreen things like Aesop's fables or the poetry book we read every day, as well as Bible memorization cards. But then there's also a lot of new thematic things in it, like the poem we read and memorize, the hymn or song we listen to, the piece of art for a picture study. If you're ever interested in knowing more about how we do our morning time and what's in our morning basket, I will link to my video about what's in our morning basket below. Another way to feed our children true, noble, and good ideas is to read to them as much as you can. Nurturing a love of learning and exposing my children to beautiful stories that fuel their imagination and feeds their soul is so important for children, especially at this young age. It's also a habit that helps develop so many skills, such as attentiveness, listening skills. It helps develop their imagination. It just fosters also that family connection time. The more we read to them, the more they're able to pay attention and are absorbing the story and asking for more. Read children's books, lots of picture books. We read the Bible. We read scientific books about topics that interest them or what we're learning about. And this year we started reading chapter books. It's more beneficial for a child to be read to and to learn to differentiate sounds than it is for us to sit them down and try to cram the learning of reading into them at such a young age. That's a lesson that's really close to my heart because when my daughter was 3.5, I picked up the book Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and we started working through it together. And at the time she did so well. She was definitely capable, but she was resistant. And yet I kept pushing through because I saw that she was capable. And every day during her little sister's nap, we would sit down at the kitchen table and we would go through a lesson. But though she was doing well, that time that we were spending doing that was taking us away from so many other things we could have been doing together. We could have been reading, we could have been playing together, we could have been connecting in any other way. And that would have been a better use of our time. We got through over 50 lessons, and that's when I started learning about Charlotte Mason and started reading Home Education and realized about the whys of delaying formal education until after the age of 6. And on a particularly tough day, I asked her, does she want to keep going with learning to read, or does she want to stop? And she said she'd rather stop and have me read to her. So we stopped. Honestly, as a parent, I found that a little hard because she was so close to reading, but I also knew it was the right thing to do. And so we spent the next months just reading together, playing outside together, doing other things. And then eventually she came up to me and she said, hey, why are we not doing that book again? And I said, well, you asked me to stop. And she said, well, now I'd like to start learning to read again. And I would love to be able to read a book by the age of 5. So when she was just over 4 years old, we started going through the lessons again. So we started from scratch. And at that time, because it was coming from her own will, she's much more motivated and she feels more ready to get through it. And it's still early. It's before the age of 6, but it is led by her, and I'm not going to deny her an education that she's seeking after. And now we're nearly done the Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons, and she's so excited to be able to recognize words in books and read passages in books. And I just wish I had waited until she herself was ready and had asked me to teach her how to read. I've recently done a series about reading together as a family and reading classics with your children. So if this is something you're interested in, I will link to that below. Most importantly, reading the Bible with my children and teaching them the Word of God has been a really crucial thing to feeding their minds and their souls with good, true, and beautiful and noble ideas. Reading the Bible and focusing on teaching our children about Jesus and His goodness, His kindness, and His unconditional love towards everyone, including sinners, has been really a beautiful thing because I've seen it as so impactful to our children's souls. It can shift the whole paradigm in a child's thinking. So for example, when my oldest daughter was playing and there was a bad guy, she wanted to pray for the bad guy as opposed to destroy him like some kind of superhero. And the other day we were taking a walk through the forest and she started naming all the things she loves in the world. And then she said, I love all the people of the world, even the mean people, I love them. And I thought that was a lesson that she learned through us reading the Bible and through Jesus' teaching. So now I want to talk about forming good habits in those early years. Charlotte Mason says, the mother who takes pains to endow her children with good habits secures herself smooth and easy days, while she who lets their habits take care of themselves has a weary life of endless friction with her children. That right there is a big driving force towards habit training my children. It's not an easy task, but it's a task that's so important for their character building, for their own self-development, and the growing pains we feel now in these early stages will pay off the more good habits we instill within our children. Teaching good habits to our children is easier the younger they are and has to be harder the older they are and the more set in their old habits they are. Those habits are things like cleanliness habits or hygiene or making their bed every day. And some are character building habits such as attentiveness, obedience, truthfulness, etc., etc. Give your children plenty of opportunities to practice those habits, and then take the time to introduce one habit at a time, and then spend weeks on that habit at end so that they can actually perfect that habit. Again, if you want to learn more about habit training, there's no better place than in home education. Here's a caveat when it comes to being a mother who pursues a Charlotte Mason education. I've come to the realization that a lot of those habits that I find noble were not instilled in me as a child. So I had to train myself later as an adult, and I still struggle with so many of them. How badly do I wish that I had been trained as a child with a really good set of habits. It would have made my life so much easier instead of having this constant inner battle when I'm trying to learn. Like a lot of things in the Charlotte Mason world, there's so much room for improvement and for mother culture and mother education. And this one comes with me learning good habits as well and leading by example. For example, learning to place my shoes tidily by the front door, or making my bed every day, or showing genuine gratitude when someone is kind to me or goes out of their way to me. It just goes a long way. Let's talk about the importance of the outdoors and of children getting fresh air every day for many hours a day. Charlotte Mason knew that the knowledge and the appreciation of nature was so important to children, and she encouraged us to prioritize being outdoors, so much so that her recommendation was actually 4 to 6 hours of outdoor time every single day. Letting children marvel at the beauty of the natural world and soak it in is so crucial to their health, their well-being, their development. The emphasis of spending a lot of time outdoors and exploring trails and forests, or even getting fresh air by playing in our backyard or learning in our backyard together, is very strong in our family and has really allowed us to develop an appreciation and a love for God's world. Being outside is really the time when I see my children's natural curiosity the most at play. That's when I get the most questions or hear the most ponderings. We learn to identify flowers and trees and learn about herbs and how they might be useful. For example, my daughter has even taught her dad that broadleaf plantain leaves that look like a mere weed are useful actually in healing wounds. And as the old saying goes, there is no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. I can attest that's true, and that's why we've invested in really good clothes and gear so that we can actually brave the elements and be out no matter what the weather. We live in Canada, so our winters are very harsh and they're often long, so we find ourselves outside all the time, even in those conditions. And I think there's something to be said about building resilience in our children in terms of facing the natural elements, like the wind, the rain, the snow, and the sleet. And I see that so well in my little children. Charlotte Mason believes that mothers should have a knowledge of nature. And so having gone into this homeschooling journey with very limited knowledge of nature, that's precisely what I'm using this time for, learning as much as I can about the natural world and about the plants, the trees, the flowers that surround us. In an age where everything's available at our fingertips as long as we have a smartphone, I still recommend getting that knowledge through books as opposed to just Googling it. It will stay with you better that way. One book that is widely used amongst the Charlotte Mason homeschoolers and that I myself find pretty useful is The Handbook of Nature Study by Anna Comstock. In the book Last Child in the Woods, the author says, "One of my students told me that every time she learns the name of a plant, she feels as if she's meeting someone new. Giving a name to something is a way of knowing it." And that's just how it feels to me too, and I would imagine to my children as well. So take your children on nature walks and take the time to observe bees as they fly, pollinating flower to flower. Watch birds build their nests as they collect twigs and other materials. Let your children play with sticks. Observe ants and other insects. Let them splash in puddles and get dirty in the mud. Children are very washable, which is a real benefit to this outdoors life. Take them to the woods, let them climb trees, build dens of fallen branches, and listen for squirrels foraging through the bushes, or looking for animal tracks in the mud or snow. Stay out long enough to see your children grow rosy cheeks, grassy feet, and muddy fingernails. So those are our 3 main areas of focus when it comes to homeschooling children under the age of 6. So of course there's still plenty of time to play, and that's something we prioritize a lot in our family. And the beauty of it is by feeding our children those beautiful, noble, good ideas and focusing on the natural world and learning good habits, that translates into play as well, and you will see so much more creativity and so much more imagination in that play. I highly recommend reading Charlotte Mason's own words in her book Home Education, and this one specifically focuses for children under the age of 9, so it will be well worth your time. I have a copy here, but it is a book that is public domain, so I have found it online for free on Ambleside Online. Again, thank you so much for being here on our homeschooling journey. If you have found this video useful and have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much again, and I will see you in my next video.